During this time, I felt frustrated, like many Jews in the diaspora did. And it all changed in May 2021. I don't know if you guys remember Operation Knife's Edge. This was a brief war with Hamas in May 2021. I was lucky during that time because October 7th, I didn't have to lose a lot of friends because I already lost them during this. You see a huge media push to actually demonize Israel and push for this very anti-Israel movement. During this time, I felt frustrated, like many Jews in the diaspora did. It was a warm-up to the media storm of October 7th.
And now we understand that this was a warm-up to the 7th of October.
Especially in how the media portrayed it. This was first huge Qatari media to kind of demonize Israel and ingrain it into Western leftist academic circles. For example, in Argentina during the Perón era, my father would tell me that even in busy metropolitan parts of Buenos Aires, there were areas where when a Jew would walk by, they would stop you and make you sing the national anthem. If you were a Jew who didn't know the Argentinian national anthem, they would beat you on the spot. What I found in Amsterdam and in many places in Europe is a Jewish community that has hammered into hiding to a very intense degree, especially in Amsterdam. One of the students there told me after the talk, he said one time he was on his bike, stopped, and he was sending a voice memo, and this man came up to him and said, "What language are you speaking?" And he said, it sounded like a Jew language. And he said, "No, leave me alone," and then pushed him off his bike and was holding him down. And he said, in demanding that he show him his passport. And if you know your history, this is very similar to what has happened. It was all with history, all throughout time. You have to know this history to understand that it's just a circle. It's repeating. When you understand it better, you're better equipped to deal with it.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop a quick comment to help us keep the conversations going. This podcast is sponsored by Kef International.
I do believe everything is ordained by Hashem, but within the lowest of consciousness, where we can see the least amount of God in this consciousness and this universe. So as the state we are now, we all have free will also. So you waver between those two things, I think.
Maybe some of the responsibility is also just challenges on the way.
Israel agreed to this. We signed up for this. I think it said went and asked other nations before he asked the Jewish people if they wanted to accept the Torah, and they were the one that accepted. So it's not a burden. It's something that we collectively chose.
We interviewed the founder of IDSF, which is some sort of a paramilitary consulting firm. And he said what I'd heard over the years, that a quarter of the Israeli Arabs, who we say live such a good life, and just like we used to say about the Gazans, like we're giving them billions of dollars, how could they not be happy? 30,000 of them come across every day. They're friends with our leftist people in Gaza. They have great cafes and stuff. And so they're living a happy bourgeois life, just like in Santa Monica or something. And that is all you need for true happiness. And yet, given the opportunity, they came over and wanted to take over the country in the most violent and vile possible way. I just want to say, I feel concerned about that. If you had in America 300 million people, if 75 million people would be happy to participate in the violent destruction of the country, that would be a problem. So the left seems to be open to that, or even cultivating that sort of thing. I'm very worried about it. I'm equally worried about the fate of Europe and the fate of America and the fate of the West. Where in LA are you living?
Long Beach.
Long Beach. How do you like it?
I love it. It's amazing. I used to live in a town called Huntington Beach, and that's where I went to high school. And it's actually one of the most anti-Semitic cities in the country. I think most people wouldn't expect from like a beach town in California, but it is. Like, they had a chapter of the KKK that was founded there. They had a lot of the punk Nazism movement. I used to work on bikers. It's very rare that you have bikers that believe in that sort of thing. I used to work at a grocery store when I was a teenager in Huntington Beach. And every Sunday, this group of bikers would come in, and they were just decked out swastika tattoos everywhere. And I remember I always wore my Wagen David. I never have taken it off ever in my life. And I remember at the time I went to my boss about the swastika guys, and I said, "Hey, why are we serving these people? that you have 5 or 6 Jewish employees here. All of them feel very uncomfortable when these people come in. Why are you accepting the business? And he goes, why don't you just tuck your necklace in and don't make a big deal out of it? Oh,
What happened? Nothing? Nothing particularly happened?
nothing happened. They would definitely not come to my checkout line. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But other than that, nothing happened. You have the capo Jews or Jews who would fight on the enemy side that would manifest as anti-Zionist Jews.
Right. Soros.
Jews that are estranged from their own identities, and they're navigating a lot of complexity instead of returning to their people, understanding that Judaism, Am Yisrael, not even religious Judaism, but just within the peoplehood, within solidarity with their people, you find the answers to that burden of dealing with anti-Semitism. And the answer is not to run away and hold hands with your enemies. There's many such reasons. I know that there's a politician in Hungary who was a very prominent neo-Nazi, saying all sorts of very bad rhetoric about Jews. And he did a DNA test, and he found out that he's a Jew.
Yeah.
And he basically did the classic tour, went to Chabad, and I don't know if he got bar mitzvah in his old age, but he advocates for Jews nowadays in Israel.
What's the story? What's the head of Argentina also? Isn't he?
He loves Jews, but he's a big advocate of Israel, right?
He is. So he's doing his conversion now. His rabbi told him, you cannot convert to Judaism while you are still president. You have to wait until after. Why? He needs to work on Shabbat.
You're 25 years old. You understand you're an artist. How did you get into art? How did that happen?
I've always been art. I was a kid that was drawing all the time and failing all my classes because I was just drawing. But I got that a lot from my mom, because my mom is an artist. And Tina, she wanted to be a painter, but her family was so poor that 18 years old, she had to work in a factory making the little plastic tips of your shoelace. Eventually, she moved to America, met my dad here, and then came back, had kids. We came back, and she had to just shell it. And I started to show interest in arts. She really nurtured me. Some people might think that's crazy because they're like, you have an immigrant, Hispanic, Jewish mom that wants you to be an artist, wants you to be a lawyer or something. I got really lucky there.
Jewish, yeah. It's very pretty.
So my grandparents were from Sicily. And before that, like Tunisia, North Africa, you have more Sephardi customs coming from there. I'm Sicilian Jew from my mom's side. These came to Argentina. Sicily, like geographically, is closer to North Africa, Tunisia, or Algeria than it is to, let's say, Milan, like northern Italy or Europe. So Sicily was the crossroads for a lot of empires. The caliphate, one of the caliphates conquered it, so it used to be Islamic territory. There's a lot of Islamic influences in Sicily that you can still find today. Arabic was one of the mandated languages to learn back then, like several hundred years ago, where people spoke Sicilian and Arabic, and that was the way of life there. So there's a lot of admixture. I just lived in Hungary for the past year.
What were you doing there?
I was doing an exhibit, an art show out there. It was difficult to deal with. No disrespect to any Hungarians. It's a very cold culture, very polite, very cold. And from my sensibility, coming from where I come from, we're loud. We can say things people might think are rude. We're like Israelis. I'm sure in Israel, you guys see a lot of Argentinians just similar to Israelis in some way. I ended up being very close with the Roma, like the gypsy community in Hungary, because they were what I found the closest to Israelis.
Your art looks very upcoming and cool and hip, and also very strong Jewish identity. The first question is, how did you do it and why?
That's what Israel is for, to have a country where Judaism is the inherent character. Judaism is a counterculture. Jewish art is a form art. If you're in Israel, there's less need to express that element of identity because so within it, you are the majority. But what I would say is go live 5 years in the diaspora and see how your art changes. See how worldly you want to be, because then you understand what Jewish artists deal with in the diaspora, and you'll understand that you have somewhat of a sacred responsibility to represent yourself, or your Jewish identity will naturally come through your art in a way that maybe it didn't before, because now you're a minority. Now you are amongst the world. You realize how small you are. The way I got started with that was worked in the music industry years, designing album covers to tour posters to merchandise sets for artists such as Doja Cat ever since I was a teenager. And it all changed in May 2021. I don't know if you guys remember Operation Knife's Edge. This was a brief war with Hamas in May 2021. I was lucky during that time because October 7th, I didn't have to lose a lot of friends because I already lost them during this. You see a huge media push to actually demonize Israel and push for this very anti-Israel movement. During this time, I felt frustrated, like many Jews in the diaspora did. It was a warm-up to the media storm of October 7th.
So I'm just gonna pull him in. It's when Hamas protested on the gates and they made like these huge protests. They say also that part of the preparation for October 7th were these protests because they got close to the gate and they installed different things and learned where our cameras are. So this was all like a cover up. And when I was in the army, I was sharing my bunk bed with a friend of mine he's a sniper. So pretty much everybody in the IDF who was a sniper was called down to Gaza and to deal with these protests because he was like, these are numbers that we never saw, like riots on the borders. And literally all the units from the best to normal infantry to elite units were there. Even units who never even dealt with Gaza were going there because the numbers were insane. And now we understand that this was a warm-up to the 7th of October.
Especially in how the media portrayed it. This was first huge Qatari media to kind of humanize Israel and ingrain it into Western leftist academic circles. I asked myself what I could do at the time. And one of the biggest things that bothered me that I would hear is that Israelis are white colonizers. And I know I look like Larry David, but I'm just party and I'm the lightest person in my family. So I knew that's not true. There's a rule in writing and in art that is you have to show the audience something, don't tell them something. And what I did was I went to my bookshelf. I found a book from the 60s that my dad had given me called Portraits of Israel. Just pictures of diaspora Jews. And I took scissors and I started to make art with them. And I posted them to my page. My first thought was canceled immediately just for portraying. They were very Zionistic designs. They were Jewish. The response overwhelming. I got so many responses from Jews telling me that they were so shocked to see Jews represented well in art. And that shocked me.
Yeah.
Because I realized we have a bigger problem on our hands. I began working with a foundation called the Langerman Foundation, and we study anti-Semitic propaganda. We study anti-Semitic art, Dreyfus periods, from paintings, infographics, leaflets, all the way to modern infographics. Jews are very starved of positive media attention because we've been lambasted for the past few thousand years. We don't know what it's like to see ourselves positively. There's Purim antisemitism and there's Hanukkah antisemitism. And the difference, she says, is that Purim antisemitism is the physical impulse to kill Jews, physical bodies. Hanukkah antisemitism is not about physicality. It's an ideological opposition to Jewish identity and roots. And in the diaspora, of course, we have, in Israel, you definitely have the physical, your physical being under attack, but ideologically, not so much. But here in the diaspora, we have both. It's a majority of it is ideological. That can actually be more heavy than just the physical, dealing with the physical dimension. But there is a big difference, I think, in an Ivy League Harvard student on a pro-Palestinian on a campus that is blocking Jewish kids from going to classes. That is a very different experience than living in a Jewish community in Israel and having rockets fired ecologically. There's a difference there. The Quran, Arabic, was one of the first languages that Mein Kampf was translated into. It was localized. And so there's a long history there. You have layers. You have Quranic Islamic antisemitism, which is baked into the Quran. It's baked into Islamic theology. On top of that, you have influences from Soviets, the anti-Zionist movements of the Soviets. On top of that, you have Nazism. or not in that order. You have a cocktail out of the pro-Palestinian sphere of influence, their radicalization. Jews buying firearms in America that's not a trend. That's a response, a necessity. So I would say learning about anti-Semitism is something that, for example, kids that are just entering high school, kids that are just entering university, these are things that they don't want to be spending their time thinking about. I don't want to think about anti-Semitism. I want to learn about anti-Semitism. I don't want to make art about anti-Semitism. Because if you understand it, then it affects you less. If you don't understand your identity, the Jew's place in the world, and how the rest of the world views your place as a Jew, then you're going to be swept up. An anti-Zionist is not by understanding their proper history. So it's do that or be swept up.
Do you feel your society or your friends, do you feel like one of those topics you're talking about every day? Are people really concerned?
For many years, I was really one of those make aliyah now people, because it's getting bad, it's getting rough. Right? I do have to raise the devil's advocate for that, though. Trust me, the last thing I am is one of those diaspora people. That's not what I believe in. If you live your life online, and if you get a majority of your perceptions of the world, of another country, another culture, even another college campus from the internet, you are getting a manic view of that, whether it's meant to scare you or meant to appease you. And so these days, what I try to do is to try to go and talk to people and see how people act, feel, so to speak, on the ground. And I'm not giving them a pass and saying, oh, it's so amazing, because the Jews said that about Germany during the 20s and 30s. So trust me, I'm not naive. But the more people I meet on the street, you would be surprised. They don't hate Israel. A lot of people are just informed, especially in America. Argentina has typically better relations with Jews. People don't hate Israel like
most people are like
maybe you think if from the outside, if you're just absorbing the news. And I know that's unpopular to say, but it's the truth. I know you were saying earlier in the call how you're scared for the West, you're scared for Europe, and I agree with you. But I think it's also worth it to go, like, online is meant to sell you an agenda. When I started pretty dumb, I'm only going to my perceptions about how the culture is from going and talking to people, my personal experiences, then it improved fast.
You have to come to Israel to form a real opinion. That's what you're saying.
Not even that. Not the other way around. Israelis need to come to the diaspora to see how things are. Maybe they will see how bad they are, or maybe they'll see how it's not as bad.
I don't think people experience it as so different, unless you read the news, of course. I asked a friend who's from Chicago, and he said, it's basically the same experience that I had when I was growing up. He was afraid of anti-Semitism then when he was a kid, and he's still afraid of it now. We heard a story from another friend in the neighborhood that when he came back after finishing studying medicine abroad, he started in Chicago. Both of these are in Chicago. When he came into the operating room, they would say, here comes the effing Jew. This was 1978. It's a steady thing, but most people don't experience it. Are you worried about Islam in America or Islam in the world?
I'm worried about Islam in Europe more than in the Americas. I don't think there's reason to in the US, but in Europe, based on my experiences living there, traveling, speaking with Jewish communities, there is cause to be very concerned. At least in the next 50 to 60 years, it's very common to say, well, Muslims are extremists, and of course that's the truth. But if you were to take 10% of their population, which is 2 billion people, what is 10%? Then what is that? 20 million? That's more Jews than there are on earth. And that's just their extremist minority. And through demographics, it's growing rapidly. I went to give a talk in Amsterdam earlier this year. Afterwards, I told one of the girls I was going to Brussels, and she told me, do not wear your Magen David in this neighborhood because they will lynch you on the street. I've also heard similar from my friends in the UK. There's towns like Bradford in the north of England, which is almost dominantly Muslim town. And I have friends that if you go there as a visible Jew, you will be lynched. I can't verify how accurate these things are. Of course, I wasn't. I did have an experience in London the last time I went was my first time walking the streets with a big Magen David. My friends told me, don't wear your Magen Davids when you go out in London. And of course, being myself, I found the biggest Magen David that I had, and I just wore it. And it was like that big. I really felt like I was in London with a Magen David like that. I walked by these 3 hijabi girls, and as I walked, yell out at me, "Free Palestine, free Palestine." And I'm a considerable distance from them. I turn around and I look at them like, are you talking to me? I'm not worried about Israel. I'm reading the Star of David. And I look at them, and when I look back at them, all 3 of them look at me and go, "Toof, toof, toof, toof," on the ground.
Yeah.
My reaction was, I laughed. I was also shocked because that was non-anti-Zionist instance of anti-Semitism that I had in a while. That is just pure, almost feels like 39 German sort of anti-Semitism. Didn't feel ideological. It was just a resistance to my presence walking by them as a Jew. There was no talk about Israel, no nothing. It was just a resistance to a Jewish symbol. So again, I'm going to say all Jews need to get out of the UK now. All Jews need to get out of America now. But I do think if you choose to stay, you need to be ideologically prepared. Like you're saying, oh, it's a trend for younger people to know. You have to know. If you choose to live in the diaspora, you have to make some sacrifice. It's that or go to Israel. You can't complain as far as I see it. You make an effort to understand this. You make an effort to protect yourself the best you can, or you go to Israel. Don't complain. But what I found in Amsterdam and in many places in Europe is a Jewish community that has been hammered into hiding to a very intense degree, especially in Amsterdam. One of the students there told me after the talk, he said one time he was on his bike, stopped, and he was sending a voice memo in, and this man came up to him and said, "What language are you speaking?" And he said, it sounded like a Jew language. And he said, man, "No, leave me alone." And then pushed him off his bike and was holding him down. And he said, in demanding that he show him his passport. And if you know your history, this is very similar to what has happened. It was all with history all throughout time. For example, in Argentina during the Perón era, my father would tell me that even in busy metropolitan parts of Buenos Aires, there were areas where when a Jew would walk by, they would stop you and make you sing the national anthem. If you were a Jew who didn't know the Argentinian national anthem, they would beat you on the spot. So this sort of entitlement to demanding a Jew's loyalty, demanding a Jew's nationality, this of course extends back to Napoleon's question to the Jewish notables in Paris, re-emancipation of Europe's Jews. You have to know this history to understand that it's just a circle. It's repeating. When you understand it better, you're better equipped to deal with it. I hear a lot of Jews in America, Europe, or even in Israel say, "They is just what's leading to the Holocaust." And I would say you're correct about it being more 20s, because in the 20s, there wasn't a lot of laws targeting Jews. It wasn't a legal thing. Today, I tell people, those kids at the encampments, don't take them for granted. Not stupid. Not stupid.
They are.
They're gonna be your teachers, your kids' teachers. They're gonna be your kids' lawmakers, and everything. So you need to watch out for that. But I'll push back on the Nazi German remark, because I think it's a part of the Jewish Holocaust. When we plead to non-Jews to understand how we feel, the easiest way for us to do that is to say it feels like before the Holocaust, or this is what was happening during the Holocaust. My experience is that this is not an effective way to do this, because you need to think about it like how a non-Jew would hear saying that today is just like the Holocaust, is that in the United States of America or Germany or whatever, they're going to build gas chambers to kill Jews. Whether or not we understand that, that's what. And is that the reality? No. Hope I'm correct about that. But I don't think anywhere in America they will be building gas chambers to kill Jews.
Yeah, we had such misconceptions, especially when you're in the West End. You love the Starbucks high-tech life. We're so in our own bubble. that we just don't know what's going on. Honestly, that's what happened with us in Israel. And I don't want to, I'm scared to assume anything today, but I always try to assume the worst, prepare to the worst. The same army, you always prepare for the worst. And if it's not the worst scenario, you always train hard. And the worst case, you'll have an easy outcome.
Nobody really about gas chamber. The point is that the Holocaust were one of thousands of ways Jews were killed or pushed out of society or oppressed. Jews need to read about other instances before and even the Holocaust in which Jewish life was made insufferable or almost miserable or even impossible to understand their context. I would say the path I could see or Europe leading down is not the path of Nazi Germany. It's the path of Soviet Russia. Basically, they didn't build gas chambers for Jews. What they did was they ideologically pushed Jews out of their country. They banned religious learning institutions. They banned the importation of unleavened bread. They made kosher slaughter illegal. These are the sorts of things that you need to look out for. If you just say a gas chamber, no one's going to take you seriously. Why they should take you seriously? That's not an option that's going to happen here, but everything else is. And when you boil it down to a gas chamber, you're missing an opportunity to be precise. So be precise. That's what Jewish world wants to hear also, is precision. It's not, Jews suffering doesn't only have to mean a gas chamber. It's manifested itself in thousands of ways more than that throughout.
It's pretty crazy how the 7th of October restructured all the Jews' minds, and Israelis maybe more in particular, of always thinking about the worst case scenario now and never taking anything into saying, maybe it's not so bad, maybe it's, but it could be just an effect. It makes sense that this is a direct effect from the 7th of October.
Understanding that the collective, Jewish collective is traumatized.
That it's not, Jews is not the be all and end all. It's like big fish, bigger fish. That's my dark scenario. So I don't think it's the Jews in particular. The Jews are just in the way of Western civilization. The Muslims want control over everything. And they have a pretty good system. If you're a Muslim and you try to leave, you have a death sentence. Or if you criticize them, you have a death sentence. Makes for good control. So
absolutely. I'm a big fan of Rabbi Sachs, and the way that he thinks about this is Islam is experiencing its violent puberty right now. Muslims today extremists would say that killing Jews is an act of a religious experience. You hear the calls that on October 7th, like kill the Jew, it's a religious experience. I don't know how that will look between the Sunni and the Shia spheres of influence. I don't know if there's a way to do that without bloodshed or reform of Islam. We're all just waiting patiently. And how we fit in that as Jews,